It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host, Smitty. Be sure to go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. We are everywhere, so go check us out on there. And go check out some of the links that we have in the description of each of these shows. Whether you're on the listening platform or over on YouTube, we've got a Facebook and an Etsy link for everything custom designs. It's our friend Haley Wagner's small business. She can create customized clothing for you, your family, your friends, wherever you want. Go check out her stuff at some of those links. Also, Happy New Year. It is 2024 officially. It's crazy how I feel like once football season gets here, the rest of the year just flies by in a blink of an eye. Because I don't know if you feel the same or if others feel the same, but it's like January to August is kind of a drag a little bit, especially when we get into the days where it's only baseball. But once you get past August and you get to that football season, college and NFL, that's whenever it's like the weeks fly by, the months go by even faster. I can't believe it's already 2024, and I can't believe that we are already at the final game of the regular season for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2023.
Yeah, we didn't know where things would stand when we talked again. I mean, the last time that we recorded a Steelers episode was following a loss to the Colts, a third straight loss where we thought that's kind of it for the Steelers. Like another poor performance from Mitch Trubisky where we saw Mason Rudolph come in for mop-up duty. We thought probably would see Mason start the following game, which we did. Now, who could have imagined that things would go as well as they did for the offense in those following two games, and we would be sitting here week 18, the Steelers still having a shot to make the playoffs. Now, they can't do it on their own accord. They don't control their own destiny by any means. They're going to need at least one of the Jaguars to lose to the Titans or the Bills to lose to the Dolphins. There's some other like weird scenarios that we can get into, but that is the easiest path for them to do so. There's actually a really weird scenario where they get in even with a loss in this one, but it's very unconventional. It's very unlikely to happen. That is the easiest way to put it to everybody is they win against Baltimore, Buffalo loses to Miami, or Jacksonville loses to Tennessee. That would put the Steelers in as the number 7 seed in the AFC, which again, you would have thought looking at their schedule like prior to the Arizona game, that's a given that they're going to make the playoffs. However, where things stood after the Indianapolis game when we last talked, very much was not a given. So what has happened in that amount of time? Mason Rudolph has taken over at quarterback. And while I don't think he's necessarily done anything like spectacular, but he's provided good enough quarterback play for this team, getting the ball to his playmakers, letting them make plays, and just been a steadying presence for them when they needed it. You know, Mitch Trubisky turning the football over way too much. So yeah, I guess that's where we should start, right? Is Mason Rudolph really changing the narrative? I mean, this is a guy that may be the most hated man in Pittsburgh following his short stint as the starter in 2019 to where we are now, where you got people, I mean, all the signs that were there 2 days before Christmas at the game, everybody clamoring to see this guy. Just one of the really feel-good stories to end 2023 and start 2024.
Yeah, if you would have said during the offseason that the unsung hero of this season, or actually very much sung at this point, hero of this season, is Mason Rudolph, I would have called you nuts. There's no way that dude would even see the field. And yet here we are, coming full circle to what Tomlin said about Duck Hodges, kind of in spite of Mason Rudolph at the time, all the way back in 2019. He's not killing us. That's what Tomlin said about Duck Hodges and why he was going to be the starter. We've kind of come full circle to that, where Mason Rudolph, as of right now, is not the one killing them. They went away from Mitch Trubisky. Mason Rudolph takes over. They win consecutive games. And even with a potentially healthy Kenny Pickett, they're still going to roll with Mason Rudolph in the last game of the season. If you would have said that scenario is going to play out, I would not have believed you. I would have called you nuts. There's no way. Mason Rudolph's career in Pittsburgh is dead in the water. He's basically just here as a body. He's never going to see the field. Yet, it's happened. And the Steelers, and not just the Steelers, but the Steelers offense has looked more competent in the last 2 games than it has looked all season long. Now, is that all on Mason Rudolph being a stellar quarterback? Absolutely not. I mean, he's not doing things that are at an elite passer level. However, he, like Tomlin said about Duck Hodges in 2019, and I'll say it right now, he is not killing you. He's not giving the turnovers. He's not giving the ball away whenever you're on the field. He's not putting your offense in bad situations. He's not putting your defense, actually, more specifically, in bad situations as well. And for some reason, somehow, some way, the offense is operating well these last couple starts with Mason Rudolph. I think that it's awesome for him. It's a great story because he's been such a journeyman, having been drafted under Ben Roethlisberger. And when you get drafted in a scenario like that, in Mason's eyes, he had to have known, like, I'm basically vying for being his backup for several years and then going to my own team and potentially getting a shot at the starter, or I'm waiting for this dude to retire. There's really no in between. The only other time I might play is if Ben gets injured, which coincidentally happened like every year, so he got to play. But I think that Mason Rudolph being able to go from where we were and where the Steeler Nation as a whole was with him, writing him off, completely saying, like, I want nothing to do with Mason Rudolph, to now he is the hero of the season and potentially could really be the hero of the season if he wins this last game in Baltimore and they get some help on the road from either Miami or Tennessee. I think that it's a great story, but what's funny is, to me, what does this mean for the future? And we don't have to answer this right now. We can answer it a little bit if you want to just continue to talk about Mason Rudolph and this game that we just had, or the last couple games just as a whole, because we haven't talked since then. But what does this mean for the Steelers quarterback room? Like the future of the quarterback room, especially if you're going into week 18 and you have a so-called healthy Kenny Pickett entering that week, and you're rolling with Mason Rudolph. I agree with the decision. I don't think I agree with the decision to roll the hot hand, and that's from the standpoint of, I want the Steelers to be in the best position possible to win the football game. And from what I've seen and what the eye test and what the stats have shown is that you have a better chance in the smaller sample size with Mason Rudolph being the quarterback than you do with Kenny Pickett, so for the rest of the season. But moving forward, if you're not going to go to your first round pick, if you're not going to go to what you were hoping is your new franchise guy whenever he's healthy, and you're going with your start to season third string quarterback, what does that say about Kenny Pickett? What does that say about the Steelers quarterback room in general, and what kind of decision they have moving forward?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fine with staying there for right now, because I think it says more about Kenny than it does about Mason. Like, because I think that still, regardless, like, we know that Mason's not going to be the solution for this team. And if there's anybody out there that thinks so, man, I mean, that is very short-sighted. And I think that that's how bad decisions get made, is when you look at a small sample size and decide, okay, this guy's shown us the way that this offense operates in 2 games enough to, strap him into a position to be QB1 in 2024. So to me, it just says more about their lack of faith in Kenny go as the guy long term. Now, could he still be the starter in 2024? Yeah, I would still, like, betting odds, if I had to place a bet on it, I think he still is the starting quarterback in 2024. As far as what the total room looks like, I've said all along, I think it's going to be a room of Kenny Pickett, a Jacoby Brissett type, and then like a mid-round pick. The question is, based off these couple games, while you can't commit to Mason as as a franchise quarterback or even a starting quarterback for your team in 2024, in my opinion, can you commit to him to maybe be the Brissett that I'm talking about, that Brissett role in a quarterback room, where now you're looking at it being Kenny, Mason, and a mid-round pick, and it's really just Mitch that you are moving out of the room? I think so. I mean, to me, any quarterback decision, any quarterback conversation for this team in 2024 is really tough to have a conversation about, because we don't know what the offense is. We don't, like, without knowing who the offensive coordinator is and knowing who's a good fit within it. It's tough, because that, to me, is where, like, that Brissett type comes in, right? If you're hiring an offensive coordinator from the outside, and it has to be an offensive coordinator from the outside, typically, if you're looking for a veteran to bring in that's run that offense in the past, whether they've been directly with that coach or at least run a similar system. So unless Mason, for whatever reason, would have some type of college tie or whatever to whoever the next offensive coordinator is, I'm still not sure I'm bringing him back in 2024. Kenny's going to be back just because of the.
What if he Nick
draft
Foles
pick
the
they put in
game?
Man.
But I mean, even that second season after Nick Foles won the Super Bowl, wasn't Wentz the starter? Because he was in Philadelphia that season after.
When did Nick Foles sign in Jacksonville?
2 years after that. I'm looking at Nick Foles' stats right now. He only started in 5 games in 2018. Is that because he got injured, or is that because they were with Wentz? I don't know. But what? Obviously, the scenario is very unlikely. But imagine if that.
So he started the opener. Happened. He started the opener with Wentz not being cleared yet. They were 1-1, and then Wentz returned as the starter for week 3. So, and then he played also week 12 due to a back injury, and then had to play late in the season as well. So, yeah, I mean, basically, it was Carson Wentz, though. Like, Carson Wentz was the starting quarterback for the football team, even with what Nick Foles did that run to the Super Bowl. And then, yeah, ended up playing. He was in there in 2019 as well. Or no, they had picked up a $20 million option, and then the same day informed him that they would void the option, made him a free agent, and then he signed with Jacksonville in the 2019 offseason.
Man, what a wild day.
His collarbone. Yeah. You thought you were about to get a $20 million contract for 1 year, and then got it voided. But he got
his street clothes
in Jacksonville as well. But anyway, yeah, that to me, like, that's just such a wild hypothetical. Like, if it were to happen, okay, maybe we have a different conversation. But yeah, as we sit here right now, I think it's going to be the liar, Kenny Pickett, back next year.
The liar,
and then I don't know.
Well, you don't trust his sources?
No. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure, we can.
No?
We can.
So what I will say is the original thing that I said what wasn't true because I said the backup. What the case was is he refused to be available in any capacity, meaning they wanted him to be the emergency quarterback, which he didn't want to do for whatever reason. Now, was it a health standpoint from his side? Maybe, because Alan brought up to me, maybe it was a case where he could be cleared with the caveat of him having to take like a pain injection or something like that. So if he wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that, then he would have said, I'm not willing to do that. So, okay, you're inactive then. But the reason that it makes no sense to me without even having any information beyond it is I get that he wasn't cleared until late in the week last week, but he was still cleared late in the week last week. So at some point they deemed that he was healthy enough. And what would have been the downside to him being the emergency quarterback? Because if Mason and Mitch get hurt, you're telling me that they would have felt more comfortable with like Connor Hayward having to play quarterback than Kenny Pickett just because Kenny had limited reps in practice? Like that's not fishy to people. Like, just on the surface, before even asking around to people, to me, there was something up with that. And then 24 hours after the game, oh yeah, he's ready to fully practice this week, and he's going to be the number 2. So, there was some, and without going any further than because clearly the team didn't think it was that big of a deal. Like they weren't upset about it, right? Because if they were, he's probably not dressing for the rest of the year if they weren't okay with him making the decision that he did.
Right.
So like, I don't want to make a bigger deal about it than it was, but I'm standing by what I said. Kenny Pickett made the decision himself to not operate as the emergency quarterback for that game.
I just find the whole thing interesting. Like, in a game where odds are you're not going to touch the field, what would it have mattered? That's what I don't wrap my head around. It's like,
yeah. I mean, I'm sure there was some frustration on his part as well. Like if he was told, okay, I don't want to dive into too much of this because like, I don't want it to come back on anybody. But
Hashtag
from what I was told, Adam Schefter voice, he was told during Bengals week, regardless of how that went, he was going to start versus Seattle. They made a decision on Wednesday to reverse course, and that was no longer the case. Mason was going to start versus Seattle. So Kenny was probably, rather put off by that decision, which to me led to what it did. Again, clearly not enough to upset the organization where they were like, okay, we're not going to have him be part of the plans for the rest of the season because he's still, he's going to be the number 2 now on Saturday. So,
well, they probably need him to be part of the plans because let's be honest, we know what's after Mason if Mitch has to go back in.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like I was saying how about this whole, like the fact that we're having a conversation about Mason and Kenny to me is more indicative of Kenny's future than anything else. The fact that we're having a conversation about the fact that we're having this conversation about like if it was like that ugly and in most scenarios Kenny wouldn't even be active, which I don't think it was, but he has to be, that's more indicative of Mitch than anything else if that were the case. But I don't think it is. I don't think the team thinks this is a big deal. I don't think that it is a big of a deal as a lot of people have made it, but a lot of people have been like in my mentions about it, and I'm not backing down from it. I don't care what Kenny has said regarding it. I don't care what his teammates have said. I don't care what his coaches have said. I think that there's like, I don't know if it needs to be a wake-up call or what to people, but I think they'd be surprised by the amount of lying that goes on in professional sports.
Yeah.
Like if anybody, did we think that Kenny Pickett was going to have a talk to the media yesterday, be like, oh yeah, that's what happened. I didn't want to be the number 3 quarterback on Sunday. Was that what people were expecting to have happen?
I mean, I did. That's definitely what I thought. But
like people were adding me in that, and I was like, this proves nothing to me. He's answering the exact same way that I would have expected him to.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the whole thing is just odd, and I'm trying to find what Derek said about this whole situation because he had something that I agree with, or I agreed with because it was prior to the game in Seattle, and he basically said that if Kenny Pickett is your quarterback of the future, then he has to start. Yeah. Then he has to start. And if he's not going to be starting, and if he's not in there, then you've got bigger problems at quarterback than you realize.
Yeah.
Or than most people
agree.
realize.
So, you kind of brought up already, can the Steelers go back to him in 2024 as the number 1 quarterback? Or has that decision already been made?
Have we reached it? You remember last year when we said, if you start Kenny, you can't go to Mitch. But if you start Mitch, you can always go to Kenny. Last year?
Yeah.
Have we reached a point where it's like, we started Kenny, and now we went away from him, but can you go back?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it happen, and these aren't like good situations to bring up, but like Zach Wilson with the Jets, he's kind of been put in that limbo in and out of the lineup. Mac Jones with the Patriots, like there's situations where it's happened and they haven't turned out well.
Here's the thing, though. Both of those scenarios, and I say this because I'm not trying to defend my boy Zach Wilson, BYU guy, but I am going to compare the two. We haven't seen the success from somebody else in those offenses. Like if they bring in another guy, like sure, like you get like a one-off game of like from Bailey Zappi. I mean, like well, look what he did against us. But as far as like especially New York goes with the Jets, it didn't matter who they brought in. That offense is dysfunctional, but suddenly Mason Rudolph comes in, and I'm not trying to say like Mason Rudolph is the godsend and that he's the savior of this franchise and this offense, but like Mason Rudolph comes in and you have back-to-back 30-point games. I mean, that's probably what your first back-to-back 30-point games since the Killer Bees were on your team.
They did it weeks 5 and 6 of 2020, but since like prior to, I don't know. But they did it in 2021.
So it's been at least several seasons since it's happened. That's where I'd say the difference is from those positions, those scenarios, and like those spots. Like the Patriots quarterback Jets quarterback. Like, those are just more so dysfunctional teams right now, dysfunctional offenses, more than the quarterbacks they have throwing in there and out there. We see what the quarterback position and what the offense looks like with somebody that's not Kenny or not Mitch Trubisky, someone that's at least operating it at a functional level like Mason has in 2 games. I think that makes it even worse, in my opinion, is that not only do you get better play, but it's not a dysfunctional system, because we've seen it in back-to-back games. It was just a dysfunctional quarterback.
Yeah, from a results standpoint, sure, but I was only bringing those up because of the idea of him going on the bench and then coming back in. Like, we've seen it multiple times with those guys, with young quarterbacks kind of just being pulled out and put back in to the lineup. So I think it's a possibility, but I think you're kind of rolling out the idea of him being the guy, like, long term. Like, you can go back to him for 2024 and make him compete for a starting job. And again, like, if you asked me right now, I think that he is the, day one starter for this team next year. But I think it's an indictment in terms of how you feel about the guy long term, for sure.
Steelers have a tough situation ahead. I mean, they've had one, but it's going to be tough moving forward. To know whether you're gonna, because, like, if you're the Steelers, do you, depending on how the board falls, do you consider taking a quarterback early in this draft based off what you've seen? I know you just took a first-round quarterback 2 years ago, but I feel like, quarterback play, you can only wait so long.
Yeah, it's the most important position, and you got to throw darts at it until you got, the answer. So for me, it should be on the board for them to consider. From their standpoint, I don't think it's going to be. Like, I think that they're going to, once again, Kenny, some type of backup that has experience with whatever offensive coordinator is brought in, and then like a mid-round pick. And I don't even know if this guy would qualify as a mid-round guy now, because he might go earlier, but like a Michael Pratt out of Tulane, who I keep bringing up, to me just makes so much sense if he's there. Cam Ward, who just declared for the draft, could make sense too if he's going to be around. So, I think there's going to be some options there for them as well. There's a lot of interesting, like, people talk about obviously what's at the top, right, with like a Caleb Williams and Drake May, but there's a lot of interesting guys that are going to go on day 2, in my opinion, as well. Like, I think round 4 is like kind of the sweet spot, but I don't hate the idea of doing it earlier. Like, if they took one in round 3, I'd be totally cool with it, just because, again, like, look how many backups have had to play this year anyway. Like, you need to get a cheaper option in here for Mitch Trubisky, and also find one that can play, because odds are at some point that guy's going to have to play.
Yeah, I mean, we're on our 3rd quarterback this year, so that checks
Case
out.
Point. Yeah, absolutely. But okay, enough with that stuff for the time being. This is stuff that we're going to be talking about a lot of time through the stretch anyway. I don't know how you felt, but this game against Seattle, to me, whether it looks like it on the surface or whatever, if you just looked at the box score, eye test, to me, best game from the offensive line, and best game from, the running, like, Jaylen Warren was still very good in this game. I think he's had better games individually. Najee Harris, though, I thought he had his best game for sure this season, right up there with one of his best games as a pro for sure. The ground game was just cooking. And the most impressive thing about it, one, Seattle, even though on the season they don't look like they're very good against the run, have been trending in the right direction in that area. And also, they were stacking 9 in the box. Like, they were daring the Steelers to pass it, and they were just like, nah, we're just going to run it down your throat anyway. Like, we're telling you what we're going to do, and we're still going to do it. This was like textbook bully ball on Sunday, and they were very impressive.
Yeah, I thought it was a dominant performance, especially up front. I mean, you got over 200 yards of rushing on the day, and your highest output of offense as a whole on the season. I think that it was impressive to see what they were able to do, and I was kind of nervous, like, going into this game, to see how they would respond after like a good week, the week prior, to see if they would keep it up, like, to see if it was like going to be the same, or if
like
it would look
down potentially.
Yeah, like, or if they'd be like riding off of a high performance and then be a letdown of a performance. But it wasn't that. I mean, they figured out an identity early on too. It was like they figured out that they can run the football, and they were going to be able to run the football the entire day. And I felt like there was a certain point too where not only did they figure it out, but they tried some passing, and then they're like, nope, that's not working. We're just going to go back to running the football. And it is very evident when you see that they ran 46 times and they only passed 24 times. I mean, there was a clear leaning towards one side of the offense for that. And I think it was a smart thing to do. I thought Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren both were great on the ground. And like you said, the offensive line, this is arguably their best game of the season. And I think that it's a nice thing to see from from outside looking in terms of you always want to be like peaking at the right time. Now, obviously the Steelers don't control their destiny, but if they manage to get into the playoffs, you would like to have the offense peaking at the right time. And then based off the last 2 weeks, that's what they've been doing, is they finally figured out what kind of identity they have. Whenever Mason Rudolph has been the quarterback, they figured out that they can run the football and they can run it well. And they have a pair of running backs that can bully people. And I think that is great going into this game against Baltimore. And especially since Baltimore secured up the #1 seed and everything, they already announced that Lamar's not playing, but I'm sure there's not going to be just him. I'm sure it'll be a number of people that they're probably resting for Baltimore. But I don't know how anybody can be displeased with this offense after not just this performance against Seattle, but just the last 2 weeks in general. I think that as far as a Steeler fan goes, obviously you'd like to get those games against Carolina and New England, or not Carolina, Arizona and New England back. But in a scenario where you don't control your destiny and you just kind of have to hope for the best, you still feel pretty good about where you're at, and in the hopes that you can get some help when it comes to getting into that playoff.
It kind of all balances out, right? Like, okay, of course, they should have beaten Arizona and New England. Even one of those, obviously, you'd be in, at the worst, a win and you're in for sure type scenario against Baltimore, if not already clinched going into this week. But, like, you tell me before the season, the Steelers are going to win 10 games, which what they would be at if they were to win on Sunday, and 5-1 in the division. That's about where I would have thought they would be anyway. So, like, they're going to win games that you feel like they shouldn't. They're going to lose games you feel like they shouldn't lose. So, I don't know. At the end of the day, to me, it all ends up balancing out to where the team should be. This, to me, is a 10-7 football team, and that's probably they got a good shot to finish at 10-7. I mean, we're talking about them being on their third. I'm not making the injury excuse here, but like, because there's been injuries all over the league. We're on their third quarterback. And none of that, like, our starter wasn't playing well. Our starting quarterback has 6 touchdown passes on the year. And then the backup, who's played far less snaps than him, has more interceptions than that starting quarterback. You look at the quarterback play that the Steelers have gotten, 10 wins. I don't know how you can say that they should have won more than that.
I also love the comparison week by week, seeing people compare Joe Flacco's stats to Kenny Pickett's stats. Just
man, yeah,
it's so funny to see. Like, Joe Flacco in 5 games has 13 touchdowns. He has over double in half the games.
And hey, I mean, you know, all credit to him. He's been awesome there. It's been fun to see. I hate that it's for the Browns, but you know, watching Joe Flacco do his thing still in the NFL at his age has been
there. He is
pretty awesome to see. What?
That's what.
Oh,
did you see that video.
I did. I thought you were saying like there he is, like me being a hater. There he is.
No,
no, but I know. Yeah, somebody put up a side by side, and it was Joe Flacco saying there he is, and Tiger Woods saying big dog, and it
big
was like
dog.
acting like they were meeting. Yeah. But okay, yeah. So moving on from that, last time we talked, also, we talked a lot about George Pickens because that was the game where he didn't block, and then gave a very poor answer for why he didn't block, and you were kind of taken aback by my response to it because I am typically so pro player, and in that situation, I didn't find a way that I possibly could be, given the lack of effort and then the answer for the lack of effort shown by George Pickens. Now, this is going to be interesting to talk about because obviously George has done his thing the last couple of weeks on the field. Somebody at the game to me, and I posted this on X. Some dude that probably doesn't even remember saying it. So, like some older Yinzer, probably blacked out that night. I barely make out what he said, but I made out what he said. He said, "There's ups and downs in all walks of life. It's always about the response. Look at how George Pickens is responding tonight." Because he had 195 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Cincinnati Bengals. But the thing for me there is, and this isn't to downplay what he's done, and he hasn't, obviously, like from an effort standpoint, I feel like it's been there the last couple of weeks. So maybe things have finally gotten through. More power to him. He's an integral part of this offense, and I want him to be here for a long time.
Blocked for Jaylen Warren specifically.
Yeah. But it's not like that performance to me was like the answer to all the questions, because it wasn't about like the on-field talent or anything like that. We knew the skill set.
It wasn't about his receptions and yards.
Right. I wanted to see how he would respond when the ball's not in his hands and when the offense isn't performing well. What is he going to do the next time that happens? So we've seen, obviously, the blocking effort be there since. We haven't seen, the offense in a situation the last couple of weeks. Again, they're kind of humming on all cylinders right now. So that would be interesting to see. But certainly credit to George Pickens, because that could have, gotten into his head, and he could have not gone out there and performed the way that he has the last couple of weeks. So, I got to tip my cap to him for sure, for going out there and having those performances.
Yeah, I think that it's great performances, and I wonder behind closed doors, like obviously Tomlin didn't really say anything the week after the whole George Pickens thing happened, but I wonder if behind closed doors, like the team, coaches, players, whoever it was, had like talked with George and basically just like kind of laid out like how things are supposed to go in the NFL. Like those are not things you're supposed to say. That's not things you do. Like just because it seems like such a dramatic bounce back, like not only statistically in terms of his yards and everything, but just like over the last 2 weeks, it seems like hasn't been really a flaw with George Pickens. So I just wonder if behind closed doors, someone said something to him that really triggered him and or like opened his eyes to a new point of view of how he should be thinking whenever he's playing out there. And obviously it's worked. He's had great, and who knows, maybe this all just goes back to Mason Rudolph being the quarterback, and that's what we needed. But I've been impressed, obviously, that Bengals game, the 2 touchdowns that he had, the 2 long touchdowns that he had, impressive. But like you said, that was never in question of like the talent of the actual player. It was more so like part of decision making on the field whenever you don't have the ball in your hands. What kind of player are you like whenever those scenarios are happening? And over the last 2 weeks, it's been a good response. I don't think that I'm not fully in the I'm all in on George Pickens again in terms of like forgetting about what he said. That's going to be something that he has to continuously prove to myself, and I'm sure to a lot of other fans, is like that he's not going to have that attitude that he did against the game in Indianapolis. But I at least like the response from what we've seen so far. But it's going to be something that's continuous. I'm not all for I'm not going to be all just once. I'm going to forgive him and move on. Everything's fine. This is going to be something that he will have to continue to do week in and week out.
Yeah, I would agree. Before we obviously, I think, again, going back to the last time we talked was after this Colts game. Minkah Fitzpatrick got hurt in that game. He hasn't played since, so we've seen Patrick Peterson have to take over at safety. And man, I'll be honest,
full time.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is like I just talked about with Mason, like not overreacting to a small sample size. But I think the difference here is we're talking about a guy that you feel like kind of has to make that transition at some point anyway. The corner to safety thing has happened for a lot of guys in the past, typically to a way to extend careers. We talked about it happening with Joe Hayden, didn't come to fruition. Patrick Peterson may be following along those footsteps of guys like Charles Woodson, Rod Woodson, Devin McCourty. Guys have done it in the past. Yeah, I agree. Like what it means for the rest of this season with Minkah, if Minkah's able to get back on the field on Sunday, I don't know. I think it looks interesting there, but certainly going into next season, Patrick Peterson, who I expect to be back, Maybe they do something different with his contract if they don't want him to be backed at that number and like give him a like 1 year extension to switch up the numbers and stuff and alleviate a little bit of it for 2024. But I expect him to be back. I think he's playing safety for the Steelers next year, and they'll look for a different way to reshape the corner room next to Joey Porter Jr. because I think, again, small sample size, but the experiment, in my opinion, has worked out very well.
I think so too. I think he needs to make the move. He's slow. I mean, let's just face it. He's slow. Everybody on the field for the Steelers is slow right now in that secondary, it feels like. So to have the way that they handled it on on Sunday. Yeah, they played on Sunday. I'm so used to I got used to Saturday games. Now they're back to Sunday, but then they're going to be on Saturday this upcoming week. It's throwing me off. Yep. But the way that they handled their secondary on Sunday, I thought that it was really well, and it was efficient too, I felt like. And so if they want to make that transition with Patrick Peterson, I'm all ears. I'm all for it. Full train on that, because if he's going to be on the team, then he needs to play safety. And I think these two games, like you said, you don't want to make a huge deal out of a small sample size, but it was fairly clear throughout the entirety of the season that he just didn't have it, especially whenever it comes to man-to-man corner. But safety will kind of help alleviate that. And so I agree with you. I think that that's a smart move to make, and especially to have you're questioning who was going to be playing alongside Minkah anyway, as far as who's the strong safety goes. You could potentially just make Patrick Peterson your future strong safety for 2024 and have that as a duo in the backfield of those defensive backs.
Yeah, and then I would think Trenton Thompson's on the roster again in 2024, so you can do a lot of different 3 safety stuff with those 3, which they've been trying to do, but somebody just always seems to be hurt. Like last year, DeMonte KZ didn't play until week 10 due to an injury. This year, they had the idea of it being Minkah, Keanu Neal, and KZ, and one of those 3 has pretty much been hurt all year, if not more than one of them. So they just haven't been able to do it. So yeah, they will go into 2024 with the idea that they're going to be able to do it again, and we'll see if it actually comes to fruition. But I mentioned Joey Porter Jr. briefly within there. Won the Steelers Rookie of the Year award, the Joe Green award that the team gives out every single year, which in this rookie class, like in any different year, you could very easily see Broderick Jones winning this or Keanu Benton winning this based off what they've done this year. But Joey Porter Jr., in my opinion, was the right selection. You look at what he's done since being put in the lineup, brought him along slowly, and what I think we're seeing with the returns now was the right call. Because they're letting a corner shadow basically for the first time since Ike Taylor was here. Like at times they would do it with Joe Hayden, but typically the Steelers are just like, you're the left boundary corner, you're the right boundary corner, and they just roll with it, whatever receivers over there. Joey Porter Jr. is shadowing teams' #1 wide receivers week in and week out as a rookie. I mean, the faith they have in this guy is through the roof. He's returning that investment and that belief for sure. And I just think it makes you all the more excited for what the future holds for Joey Porter Jr. And again, I think they need to do more work in that corner room to put other guys, opposite of him. But man, it's hard to believe that like anything other than they got a really good one in Joey Porter Jr.
Absolutely. And we mentioned it at the time. We mentioned it. You just mentioned it now. Like the way they handled it and not just throwing him into the fire and starting him week 1. I think that was a smart thing to do. Kind of get his feet wet a little bit, rolling up to whenever he was going to be that starting cornerback. Because it took a little while, and I'm sure that surprised some people. Even when he started to play a little bit more, for him to actually be a starter, it took a little while. But the way that he's played since taking that role, he's easily the team's cornerback 1. And in a draft class that has several guys that could have won this award, and I can't say it enough. I said it so many times after this draft class was solidified that on paper this was going to be the best draft rookie class that we've seen in our lifetime, top to bottom. And I don't think that that's disappointed this year. I think that we have 1 game left, and I think that after seeing 16 out of the 17 games this season, I can say with a certainty that I think that overall, top to bottom, this is the best overall class that we have seen, because we've gotten several contributors from a lot of key draft picks, but not only several contributors, but you got a number one corner, you got a starting tackle, you got a starting defensive tackle, and you got a great blocking tight end, and I guess when they throw to him sometimes, in Darnell Washington. Herbig has been really good in the smaller sample size that he's gotten. I mean, this draft class, there could have been multiple guys win this award, and that just speaks to how good it was overall, but how good Joey Porter Jr. has been, the fact that he won it over everyone else in this draft class. He's easily a cornerstone for this defense moving forward, and I can't believe that we got him at 32.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Herbig. He had like the game sealing play on Sunday. I know that it ended up being a one possession game and everything like that.
TJ had to teach him how to celebrate.
Hey, he's not a me guy, you know? It's all about the team and just making plays.
I know what he's. It was funny watching TJ talk about that. He's like, yeah, I had to teach him, like, hey, here we have to do the handshake, and then over here's the camera. You have to run to that. It's like he definitely blacked out in that moment. Had no idea what was happening.
But yeah, he's been awesome when he's been on the field. Again, playing behind Watt and Highsmith, going to be hard to get those types of opportunities. But when he's gotten them, he's definitely made the most of them. Before we get out of here, got to do predictions. Again, we know that going against the Ravens without Lamar Jackson, we're going to see Tyler Huntley, but it's a little bit hard to really pinpoint this just because we don't know how many other regulars we aren't going to see. The most it could really be is 7 because you can only have 7 inactive players in total. So Lamar Jackson will be one of those. So 6 other guys. You would think like the injury report could dictate a lot of that. Like Marlon Humphrey's been banged up. Kyle Hamilton could come back in this one, but like, is it worth it to do so? Ronnie Stanley, who's obviously had his fair share of injuries, but then you look at older guys, right? Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, OBJ, would they make sense to sit in this one? Zay Flowers has been dealing with a calf injury. So like, so hard to say. I think the Steelers are going to take care of their end of the bargain here. I don't know that they're going to get the help that they need to get into the playoffs, but I think they're going to take care of business, everything that they can control from this point forward and win this football game. I'm not going to say they're going to have the same offensive output because regardless of who's out there for Baltimore, I just have, so much respect for Harbaugh and what that defense looks like and the structure of it. McDonald, their defensive coordinator, who I hope, please, somebody give him a head coaching job this cycle so he can get out of Baltimore because his defense is awesome. I just have so much belief in the Ravens as a whole, regardless of who's out there, that they're going to be able to be competitive in this one. So I'm going to say 24-16, the Steelers win this one.
I think the Steelers are going to take care of business as well. And it's just really unfortunate that you're not in a win in your in scenario, that they have to rely on somebody else. But I think,
and it's not even know if you're in on Saturday. They play on Saturday night until Sunday. Unless the Colts and Texans tie Saturday night. But
yeah. So I'm going to say that the Steelers are going to take care of business. They're going to handle it, and I think the offense will still look good. Like I'm not expecting to put up like 34 points, or 30 plus points even. My score is probably going to be pretty similar to yours. Or actually, it is pretty similar to yours. I'm going to say that the Steelers are going to win this one 23-13. There's no way we're going to lose to that damn Ute Tyler Huntley. So I am going to say that the Steelers are going to handle the business in this one. And I just, despite how Baltimore has been playing, and in Steelers-Baltimore, like Steelers-Ravens game, I really don't think it matters how good either team is. It's just one of those games where brings a lot of emotion out of guys. It brings the best out of each of these players, and I don't think it matters that the Ravens have won. What are they on, a 6-game winning streak, and they just blew out the Dolphins? I throw that all out the window. I understand Lamar's not playing, so it's easy to say. But even if Lamar was playing, the way that Lamar has played against the Steelers, I feel the same way about that. I still feel that the Steelers and the Ravens they bring out the best in each other, and so the Ravens are going to get the best version of the Steelers on Saturday.
Insert that video from Noah Hiles throwing the record book out the window. I don't know if you ever see. I guarantee he tweets that video on Sunday as well, or Saturday, I should say. Sorry. Still throwing me off. Yeah, 3 Saturday games this year, 2 Thursday games, a Monday night game. The Steelers only have 9 wins this year, and they've won on 4 different days of the week.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. That was actually the case even when they only had 8 wins, though. So, but all right, that'll do it for us for the Steelers episode this week. Let us know what you guys think in the comments about this game. Hit us with some predictions, maybe one bold prediction, anything like that. Any questions for the next episode, comments on anything that we discussed, anything like that, hit us in the comments. Leave us a 5-star review if you were listening somewhere else, whether that be Apple, Spotify, whatever your podcast platform of choice may be. In the description of the show, we have a link to Everything Custom Designs, our friend Haley Wagner's small business. Facebook and Etsy, both are below. There's a lot of custom clothing, t-shirts, hoodies, etc., just not hats. So everything but hats, custom designs is really what it should be called. But maybe we'll get there in the future. I wouldn't count on it, but maybe we'll get there in the future where she's doing hats. But that's all for us. Go check out another video that should be popping up on the screen right now, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.